Today's event is part of an annual event that we try to do each year, an educational training to make people more aware of domestic violence, particularly in communities of color, addressing the problem, acknowledging that it exists, recognizing there are things that each of us can do to prevent it or to lessen its impact in our state.
When you're having a sexual interaction with your partner, you want to check in during each phase of the interaction to make sure that you and your partner are still in sync. So when you go to embrace your partner, make sure, and as we tell the 2-year-olds, use your words. Make sure that this is good for that person, that you're pulling them into your person. When you start kissing, say, are you cool with this? When you start groping, say, are you still cool with this? When you start removing clothing, say, are you still cool with this? When you become prostrate, or if you're cool, up against the wall, have you do it. You know, check in with your partner through every phase. As you check in with your partner, just make sure that at every stage, so all of us need to have those conversations with all of the people in our lives. We spent a lot of energy having conversations with the girls in our lives about how to be careful, but we also have to spend some energy having those conversations with the boys in our lives. So they know we know how they have to navigate the system, but we need to tell them so that they'll have those tools. So that's an example of a prior to time zero intervention. And the value of that is that if we all keep doing it every time we hear anything on the news, it helps change our culture. I want to say one more thing about that. The other beauty of Courageous Bystander or upstander or whatever you want to call it, it's a fluid term that can be used in different kinds of circumstances. We use it in domestic violence. Those of us who do sexual assault work, we use it in sexual assault. Those of us who do bullying, we use the terminology in bullying. You can use it for all the isms. You can use it for racism. You can use it for sexism. You can use it for somebody who you hear criticizing somebody's sexual identity. It's a tactic that we can use across all of the isms. And our goal is to change our culture so that everybody learns how to respect and appreciate the next human being on the planet.
I want to discuss domestic violence from the perspective of the community and how it's impacted and how important the Courageous Bystander is. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, on a typical day, the domestic violence hotlines nationwide receive over 20,000 calls. This figure stunned and saddened me as I thought about the catastrophic damage, physical as well as mental, occurring in the lives of victims and survivors daily, in addition to the lives of the vulnerable children and the society as a whole. It also brought to mind an Islamic hadith that says, the community is like the human body. When one part of it hurts, the whole body hurts. And we all agree on that, right? We certainly are in crisis. Years ago, domestic violence occurred more than not under the cloak of silence. It wasn't talked about a lot. And we all heard, and I've grown up under the old adage of what happens behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. However, today, incidences of domestic violence have unfortunately increased and oftentimes tend to dominate the daily news cycle. In fact, statistics say that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact, sexual violence, and/or intimate partner stalking, with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, PTSD, use of victim services, and contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. We also are living in such a diverse society. where we have different cultures, religious, and environmental factors that not only are shaping the victims, but as well as the perpetrators and the courageous bystanders. And it's helping to shape and mold each of their coping mechanisms as well. Next, I want to talk about the effects of DV on the community, which are, as we all know, are very far-reaching. You're looking at the breakdown of the family, the dissolution of the structure of a family. Oftentimes, the father is taken out of the home if police are called. There's no contact orders put in place. That, in and of itself, affects the criminal justice system as well, too. It does impact homelessness. Again, people are taken out of the homes. People sometimes don't have anywhere else to go. So then you have people living on the streets, living in their cars, just trying to survive. Generational violence. We know that oftentimes when domestic violence occurs, the babies in the homes, they're seeing it, they're witnessing it. I read where men who as children witnessed their parents' domestic violence were twice as likely to abuse their own wives than sons of nonviolent parents. And that's not too far-fetched, because when you're sitting there and you're living in that environment where the children are watching it, they start to think that this is normal. It becomes normalized behavior. And that's where, Paulette, what you talked about, the zero impact, zero timeline, is important, because we have to kind of deconstruct that thinking of the children so that they know that this is not normal. This should not occur like this. We have to model pro-social behaviors and interactions between partners. We know that it also affects the medical costs and as well as the employment and job stability. Victims of intimate partner abuse lose a total of 8 million days of paid work each year, which is the equivalent of 32,000 full-time jobs. That is amazing. That's amazing. That's something, I tell you. And I just personally just feel like domestic violence, it stunts the growth of a moral society. Yes. It's just, you know, there's no God-centeredness, there's no God-centeredness in our culture anymore. People are just doing what they want to do. They're treating their partners just without even thinking about the ramifications of it, what it's doing to the generations of the legacy of their own family, not to mention the whole society. So, I, working in the community, I've seen and I've heard, and as a young child myself, have witnessed domestic violence in the home. And I've noticed, you know, when I was preparing for this, it took me back to thinking about how the neighborhood came, to be quite honest, to my mother's defense. And this was years ago. So as I said, back then, domestic violence was handled a little bit more quieter. But and it was done in very subtle ways. One neighbor would just befriend her. She would come over. They would have coffee together. They would talk. They would laugh. And as a young girl, I could see how that made my mother feel so much better. There was a friend. There was a camaraderie. There was just a friendship. It was a safe space. It was a safe space. And as a little girl, that meant so much to me, to see that being given to my mother. Even though all I did, I kind of just watched, you know. I didn't really voice too much because I was young. I'm just like watching and learning, but I could see the positive impact it had on my mother. Another neighbor would always come and she would say, Les, do you need something from the store? Can I get you something from the store? Just in subtle ways. Another neighbor would ask to help watch me, you know, while my mother could go out and do things. So way back then, I could see the impact of the Courageous Bystander. Now, they did not take a direct approach while things were happening, but they came in. They swooped in, and they were life-saving. They were life-saving. So I just want to just reiterate, like, as it's been said so many times today, we all have the capacity to be courageous bystanders. You don't have to jump in the middle of anything. Certainly if you feel comfortable with intervening, do so, but safety is first. Safety is first. But certainly we all can help in other ways. We can, excuse me, go and assist and talk and provide that open space. We can bring food. We can watch the kids. It's so many different things. And you can see what do you need? You ask the victim, what do you need? What can I do for you? And that sometimes is life-changing in and of itself. It's important to recognize and acknowledge the autonomy of the victim, as well as meeting them where they are. You cannot impose your will, your judgments, your own personal biases or prejudices on the victim. So it's just important to just give them the space. And I think that even talking in community groups and encouraging people, or at least letting them know about being a courageous bystander, it's important to kind of teach them these things. Because in the streets, it's about survival. It's about, just doing one thing after the other. And people just kind of, we operate out of our just natural, in Islam we say fitra. We operate out of our own natural being. And so you may jump in, you may say something that maybe you shouldn't. But it's important maybe to kind of start to teach the community how to not try to re-traumatize the victim, how to try to not be judgmental, how to try to just create that safe space, how to just be there, have that open camaraderie. That's important. It's important for us to get into the community, like I said, and to maybe offer some mediation services, offer some free family counseling. I got 10 minutes, y'all. Offer some free counseling, and just teach them how to not belittle, not to be disrespectful. Like years ago, growing up, you were taught to be respectful. You were taught to handle yourself in a respectful manner. You were taught certain things, and I don't see necessarily that same kind of thing going on these days. I'm not saying across the board, but just in some households, And so these things, we have to kind of retool ourselves and reteach these things and teach them to the babies as they're growing up. You don't wait till they get to be adolescents. You start teaching them from the ground level up. And we just have to continue to speak out against wrongdoing, speak out against negative propaganda. We see the media, we see the video games, we see the music industry. How lucrative are they? We see all kinds of the domestic violence and the language inside of the music industry. In closing, I just really want to leave you with a poem that I thought was pretty powerful. It's by an unknown author. And as you listen, I want you to just reflect on the victims and the survivors that you've met. But I also want you to think about those whose paths you have not yet crossed. And it's called She is Woman. She is woman. She is mother, daughter, wife, sister. She is a person. She is strong, smart, crafty. She is passionate, courageous, and generous. She is action, emotion, and devotion. She has hope. She has beauty, and she has power. She gives you life. She gives you respect, love, and gratitude. She believes in you. She will nurture you and fight for you. She deserves nothing less from you. And for me, that was really, resonated with me a great deal in that I believe that God is the creator of all of us. And we all, as human beings, are due respect. We're worthy of it. We're worthy of love. And that when the woman comes and sits, and not just women are victims, as we know, but when the victim or survivor comes and sits at the desk with us, or if we engage with them in the community, remember, this was not always their journey. And so at whatever path you meet them on, be respectful, give them love, be open, and just invite them in. They're deserving of your love, they're deserving of your respect, and they're deserving of your time. And in saying that, I just want you to, when you leave from here, just think about, will you be her courageous bystander? Will you be her courageous bystander? Her life may just depend on it.
So in the 30 years that I've been doing this very important work and working with men, one of the things that always has been there, and I'm talking about men from different backgrounds, men from different cultures, is the belief system. And one of the things that we do in the program is we unpack that belief system that a lot of the men have, especially when it comes to disrespect of women. And that is like the number one thing that I find that is very prevalent, the disrespect of women. And it happens actually with all ages. Somebody asked me once, is it more with the younger guys? I say it's with the younger guys, it's with the older guys. The oldest man that I work with is 84 years old. And he had some beliefs that I was like, wow. I mean, obviously, you know, he's not going to make many changes at that age. But I think for a younger guy, at least you have a chance of getting to them. So just the other night in group, a 22-year-old was making the comment that, that's all right, I can leave this girlfriend and get another one. So my challenge was, what, like a pet? What are you talking about? So in his mind, he has learned from the time he was this high that one is that women are dehumanized, and the other is that I don't have to respect them. So that scares me because here is a young guy, and he's our tomorrow. So I'm glad he's in group, but I also hope that through that time, he also learns that you have to respect women, and you have to respect yourself too. A couple of months ago, I was at a conference, and someone said, I think that one of the reasons why we men have lost respect for women is we have forgotten the pain of women, meaning the pain that they went through to give birth to us as men. And so I think that we need to come back to that and at least teach them to have empathy so that they can treat women better. And these are a lot of guys, you know, that have daughters. And you want to know something? If you want to get to an offender, talk about their kids. Talk about their kids. Talk about their daughters and ask them, do you want your daughter to date you? Because that is a question that I usually ask. I usually will get real with the men in terms of, you know, what is it that you need to do and think about and actually reflect about yourself. Why do you do the things you do? Why do you want to live that way? So when somebody makes the comment of, well, I can get any woman, my question sometimes is, bro, have you seen yourself? Do you know where you are? I had one guy once say to me, are you saying I'm ugly? I was like, bro, you just got to look at yourself, because we got to stop assuming that we are God's gift to women, because we're not. And the other thing we have to think about is, how do you treat your own daughter? How do you treat your mother? How do you treat your coworkers? Because that says a lot. Women's anger is also something that we need to teach men to accept. They do not like it when women get angry. And you know, Alexandria Cortez said the other day that they like us better when we just sit there and be pretty. Well, it's true, because when we talk about accepting women's anger, men don't understand that. Because as soon as you get angry or stand up for yourself, what are you? You know what they call you, right? The number one name that men use for women starts with a B, right? So part of the courageous bystander in me is to say, she has a valid reason to be pissed, all right? She has a valid reason to be mad at you. Well, you have to be able to accept that and question, why do you have a problem accepting her anger? One of the things that I often forget, and it's a good thing that I have a couple of people in my life that remind me of this, is I often underestimate the people that I have perhaps helped through the years. You know, because sometimes you leave a men's group and I'm thinking, oh my God, why am I doing this? You know, don't I want to go work at Walmart or something instead of doing this work? Because you leave a group sometimes and you seem like they just didn't get it. They just didn't get it, you know? And it isn't up to me to have them change. It's up to them to make the changes. So my wife said to me one day, do you realize the impact that your work can have in just one person? And kind of made me reflect a little bit. I was like, yeah, I guess you're right. I guess I am doing something good. I guess I am doing something that's more than, no offense to anybody, but one of the things I always say is when I retire, I'm gonna go be a greeter at Walmart. You know, and because I'll have nothing else to do. But, and that impact that you as a courageous bystander can make on somebody. About 2 weeks ago, one of my colleagues at Turning Point had a client, and she was being harassed in the waiting area by her husband. And another woman came in who was a client, and she noticed that she was being harassed, and she texted on her phone. I think she made a comment about what beautiful hair you have, but then texted on her phone, and I may have the wrong words, but it's something to the extent of, I'm a survivor, and I noticed that what's going on here, do you want me to do anything? And showed it to her, and pretending that it was a picture of her and her hair. And that day, that client was a hero. That client was the hero. Unfortunately, her husband had just finished 25 weeks of our program. So it made me think, you didn't learn anything. You're not even practicing the strategies that we put forward for you. Which made me feel like we got to do something different, or do we need to change something? But again, it's the choice of the individual to behave that way. One of the things that a lot of women ask me when they say to me, when they find out what I do, usually they'll ask me a lot of questions. So one of them is, why do men do that? Well, a lot of times it's because one of the things is that the way we're socialized as men in our culture. In our culture, we're supposed to be what? Strong, know everything, know all about sex, false, you know all these things. So when the men come into our program, they have all these beliefs, so it's hard for them to make changes. Because if you make changes, that means you got to give up a little bit of power. And it's very difficult to do that. To give up power means I have to then maybe become a bit vulnerable, and God forbid I do that. So do I have to believe that men can change? Yes, of course, or else why would I do this work? Do I believe that we can do better? Of course we can. Challenging men to stop the madness of being abusive, either physically or emotionally, is, it'll probably go on after I'm gone, because unfortunately we can only, one at a time. We can only work on one at a time with what we do in the work that I do. But don't underestimate the power of the helping relationship.